I'm Scott Perdue with FlyWire, and I've got Juan Brown here with
Hey, good morning.
Blancolirio. You're watching BSWorks, and this is episode number 2. We made it this far, and we got a guest today. His name is Kevin Price, and in my video, he's over here. So say hey, Kevin.
Hey, how y'all doing? Juan, nice to meet you. I've watched your shows before, or program and videos, and I think I actually saw you up at Oshkosh last year, but I didn't take the time to go shake your hand. So
Well,
nice to meet
great.
you
Well,
again.
thanks for watching.
Talk to you. So
Well, great. Excuse me.
There you go. Get a cup of water. That's a good idea.
Yeah, the magic of editing. I can cut that bit out. So Kevin is works. He's a retired Air Force guy. He flew that airplane in his background, the F-16.
Yeah.
yeah, the one on top.
Yeah, the lunar module or the space shuttle.
Yeah.
But after that, he went to work for AFRL, and that is the logistics, Air Force Research Labs, and all that stuff in Wright Pat. And he has worked on a really incredible project called the Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System. Is that the right way?
Right.
Yeah. And it's done an incredible job with F-16s. They're moving on other airplanes. And he's got a save, an additional save he's going to tell us about. But that's not the big reason we have him here today. Big reason is that he's here today.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because he's got a Velocity, and he was flying, and he had a Sentry, a 4-flight Sentry in there, and it told a tale that it said it had detected a high CO level. Carbon monoxide's poison, and it'll kill you quick. And fortunately, he had these sensors, and told him to do something. So tell us the story. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, I got to hear this.
Yeah. So just to really be clear from the get-go here, this has nothing to do with Velocity aircraft. It's what's interesting is that there is a thought process or thought out there that pusher aircraft, of which a Velocity is one, to that number you can add Barracouts or Long Easies and the various other pusher aircraft that have been out there over the years. So just to be really clear, Velocity is a great aircraft, and this is not an indictment of that aircraft in any way whatsoever. It was just a surprising phenomenon that developed, which I'll get into here in just a second. And so basically, unexpectedly, about 10 minutes after takeoff out of Chattanooga, heading back to Ohio, a 2-hour flight, I had got an alert from a Sentry here, which here you go. I don't work for them, but I might want to one of these days because I can credit them with, frankly, saving my life here. So, but at any rate, so we bought this. We have an awesome avionics panel in our Velocity and full Garmin suite and all. And so we just bought this as a backup to the backup for AHRS and position information. And it just so happened that it has a CO detector in it. And we bought the Sentry over the Stratus, which I also fly the Stratus when I'm instructing another aircraft. This Sentry is for this aircraft I own with my partner. And so we bought this one for a couple reasons. One, it was cheaper at Oshkosh that particular year, and battery lasts a little bit longer, smaller format, and it was just, again, a backup to the backup. I never thought about using it for carbon monoxide detection purposes in our aircraft because the general thought process or wisdom is, is that pusher aircraft are immune to carbon monoxide because the engine's behind you. You got 150 knot wind blowing behind you. So the thought process is, well, it's just it's immune to it. So as I get this alert about 10 minutes after takeoff, I go, and Juan, you're Air Force too, right? If I remember correctly, didn't you have an Air Force background?
Yeah, me. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think we were kind of taught to never just believe a firelight. You're not just going to eject out of the aircraft, right? You're going to do a little bit of analysis there and try to
analyze the situation, land as soon as conditions permit.
Exactly. So I'm looking at this thing and I'm kind of scratching my head and like, do I really want to go land? Because this is like, I don't sure I really believe this. And but
you couldn't see anything.
Oh no, not at all.
Huh.
And notably, as I'll get into it here, there was no other indications. And the only other indication I had was it just happened to have another carbon monoxide detector with me that I had bought up at Oshkosh also. I bought this one, Sporties. It was, again, I don't work for them, I'm not advertising any product here. This was $99. I bought it mostly because I travel a lot with my job, and my daughter had bought one just to take with her as as you sleep in hotel rooms all over the world. As you've seen in the news, people have died from pool saunas and carbon monoxide and things like that. So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and buy one of those. So I just happened to have it in my nav bag, and I pulled it out. And when I did, I was like, okay, we got a problem here, because
two of them.
Sentry does not give, through ForeFlight, does not give an immediate readout as to what the level is. It gives you threshold. So mine went off at 75 parts per million. When I pulled out the other one, it was 400 parts per million. And I knew at this point it was a really serious issue, and so no messing around. I got it on the ground probably within an additional 10 minutes before I was on the ground. So I was probably exposed for 20, 25 minutes to a fairly high level of carbon monoxide. And if you go look at the numbers behind that, at 400 parts per million, you have 1 to 2 hours of consciousness. And of course, you're going to start realizing degrading performance a lot, before you ever get there. And I also think, though, that this actually, as I get into the cause of what the carbon monoxide problem was, I think it was going to go much higher than that. And so I may have only had maybe another 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so before I would have been incapacitated. So what happened? So I landed, what the heck's going on here? Do I have a fire somewhere? And I'm immune to carbon monoxide because I've got a pusher, engines in the back. So I popped the avionics panel on in the front of the aircraft. I'm looking for something that's smoldering or whatever, nothing. I go back, drawing, for the engine. I look, I'm on the right side of the aircraft. I'm just looking left and right, trying to find something, and nothing. And so I'm like, what the heck? So then I put under the aircraft to the other side, and there was evidently the problem. The exhaust pipe had snapped at the flange weld. And the way the particular exhaust system is configured, it didn't separate enough away from the exhaust port for it to trigger any significant noise. There's no noise difference. One time before, I had an exhaust pipe snap, and it actually separated completely from the exhaust port, and I could hear it readily. There's no doubt about it.
And a pusher, don't those parts just tend to right through the propeller?
Well, that's another story. We'll just leave that one. That's another hour discussion there. But it did not go through the propeller. Let's just put it that way. EGT wires are pretty impressive in what they can do. So
wow.
So yeah, I actually, and that was a totally different reason behind that one. But the commonality was I had 2 exhaust pipes break over a period of time. And the situation, though, was situated such that it was not going to separate and go anywhere. It was rigidly held in place because it was connected to the exhaust pipe and the second cylinder. And so, but it moved just enough to where it had a crack to where the exhaust could basically just bleed out there pretty heavily. And so I'd been told previously that these aircraft can have a negative cockpit pressure situation. So essentially, what it did, it pulled, the cockpit was always kind of pulling air forward from the back, and it basically brought in that carbon monoxide.
So without even cabin heat, you're getting the carbon monoxide cabin heat off. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, this one doesn't have any kind of cabin heat whatsoever. And I think one of the misconceptions is that people kind of get a little bit more aware of carbon monoxide in general aviation reciprocating aircraft in the wintertime, cold weather, where they're using the cabin heat, and you've got the heat exchanger there, which is encapsulating the muffler, and therefore if you get a crack, you can get carbon monoxide into the cockpit. And so this one's clearly had nothing to do with that. And so I think I'm honestly quite fortunate to be talking to you, because carbon monoxide is no joke. I was on a 2-hour flight, and I don't think it would have come out well. Yeah, I'm aware of hypoxia, Air Force training, how many times I've been in the altitude chamber, but I would not have anticipated being hypoxic at 5,000-6,000 feet. So if I had started feeling a little bit funny, I don't know what I would have thought about it. I wouldn't have attributed it to something physiological that was triggered by the aircraft. And,
you were getting any symptoms? Did you get the headache or any of that after?
Well, I don't know. A friend of mine, we flew down to Chattanooga together, and then on the way back, or on the way down, we're still learning our airplane, and there was a Garmin display that kind of was confusing for him. And I said, no, that's not what that means. It means this, because I have a lot more hours in the aircraft. I was doing his checkout. And I said, no, that does not mean, that's not pointing at the nearest airfield. And so I talked him through it. I showed him how it actually works. And so when I had this event, I need to find the nearest airfield. And lo and behold, I completely misinterpreted it when I just taught him an hour before how it works. And so I'm, okay, so maybe I was starting to have the effects of that. And so I wound up actually initially turning away from the nearest field. And I was talking to Atlanta Center, and they knew kind of something was up because I was on flight following all the way back to Ohio. And the guy was pretty perceptive, and he started asking me if I needed help or not. At that point, I was like, no, I've got this, And so finally I figured out, okay, I'm going in the wrong direction here. And then, turned in the right direction, finally landed. And then later that afternoon, I did get a headache. So I have to wonder if I was starting to already experience some of the symptoms early on.
So when I went to the altitude chamber, I had the tingling in my fingers, tingling and numbness actually, and that was one of my early symptoms. You didn't have any of that. You didn't feel any.
No.
What your symptoms?
No, I just had a headache later in the day, and I don't know. It was honestly a bit more of a stressful situation than I think any type of aircraft emergency would have been, because if the engine quits, okay, you see that thing back there? I've practiced engine out landings like forever.
The insidious nature of this is spooky.
And so what concerned me, and I probably got a little bit more concerned than I ever have with any problem I've ever had in any aircraft, was it's no longer the aircraft I got to deal with. It's what's happening to me physiologically, And in a Velocity, you can't open the window, you can't crack the door. And really, it doesn't necessarily help much either, because other than you terminate continuing to breathe in the carbon monoxide, because if you do a bit of research, the half-life of carbon monoxide is 4 hours. So whatever you got, it's going to take you 4 hours to get rid of half of it. And so just fresh air and just not brushing it off is not going to work. Whereas in the altitude chamber, if you're low on oxygen, as soon as you put the mask on, within 10-15 seconds, you're back 100% again, right? So there was I would say, probably to a level I've not been concerned in aircraft before, because it was, can I continue to fly the airplane? And I don't really think I was affected much. I'm not really sure even if at all, but there was that concern level of, whoa, this is no longer me willing my way through it or getting through it through knowledge. It's whether my body is going to continue to function here.
How did the Sentry alert you?
The way that it works is, I wasn't sure until it actually happened. As if you just fly with it by itself, it would do some beeping noises, and those beeps though are not audible typically in a noisy aircraft, and especially with noise canceling headsets. So I never heard the beeping going off. And even with the other portable one I showed you, it also beeps. And when I pulled it out of my nav bag there, I did not hear it beeping. So that's not very, very, very useful. It'll flash lights at you. So if you're going to use, this one, and which I would quite recommend, you need to put it in some place where this little light at the bottom will, it glows, you'll know it. And you've also got a digital readout here that is something that could be in your cross check if it's prominently positioned in the cockpit.
So the Sentry didn't Bluetooth to your headset to send you an audible warning?
Yes, ultimately, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm getting to that, but when it's integrated with and used with ForeFlight, that's exactly what happened. So I get this over my headset carbon monoxide alert, and I'm like, what the heck, and I look up and there's a banner across the ForeFlight screen that said carbon monoxide alert 75 parts per million. And tap to hide it. So if you tap it, it'll go away. But I'm like looking at that and scratching my head, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And so I, at that point, pulled out the other device. So I venture to say, and I don't say this to laud or praise myself or whatever, I'm probably 1 out of 100 that in a pusher aircraft that would even fly with a carbon monoxide detector, and I'm probably 1 out of 10,000 that would have 2 of them. And I don't say that to praise myself here, but it was thank God, frankly, there was a chain of of circumstances that led to me having two of these in the cockpit. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. You couldn't hear it from the exhaust. I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't even have known after I landed because the pipe, the way it was positioned, it probably wouldn't even been noticeable as I did the pre-flight and pulled on it. So,
wow, so it worked.
It worked. That was awesome. So, interesting thing about airflow. We have in our mind how the aerodynamics goes and what the pressure systems are, but they're actually different. Typically in the Bonanza, airflow is that way. And the other thing that's really interesting is
inside the cabin.
Yeah, inside the cabin. So you would think it wouldn't do that, but it does. So the other thing that's really weird, see the big intake on later model Bonanzas right here, the whole top cowl is an intake. Instead of having NACA ducts or anything like that, it's all air that goes in there. And I just had an oil leak that I traced. It was on the front of the engine right there. And where the oil was going was up, it was below where the prop level is, so below the baffling. It would go up and forward and then out that intake area and then over the top of it onto the windscreen. So what's happening is there's airflow on the top of the engine, which is all supposed to be high pressure. That's forward. It's going forward.
Well, again, that's interesting because it's the same thing for different reasons that's going on within a Velocity, at least, is that I'd been told it has a negative. If you get smoke in the cockpit, it's not going to go out. And but again, I really want to foot stomp. Velocities are superb aircraft. None of these things I'm talking about are indicative of a problem with the design and long-standing history of those aircraft being safe and flown and loved by many. So, exhaust pipe could break on any airplane, and it's just the way this one happened. It created a chain of events, which I'm really passionate about getting the story out there. Throughout my Air Force career and even now flying general aviation, I've always been really passionate about safety and, frankly, learning from somebody else's mistakes because I don't have enough time or lives to make them all myself. And so, the first time I got in, you'll probably remember there was the Tac Attack magazine back in the 80s, and they would always go through and talk about accidents, and I'm like, well, okay, what did those people do, or how did this happen? And I really, over the years, added that into how I conducted my, cockpit ops, single seat cockpit ops. I would throw in, okay, I need to check the trim wheel on an F-16 so I don't get a roll on takeoff, even though it's not in the checklist. Right before takeoff to check that, but I would, make sure my G suit hose didn't push that knob over as I'm, moving around the cockpit right before takeoff. So I always try to learn from other people. So I'm really passionate about getting this story out. I contacted Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA, shortly after it happened. I said, hey, I want to write an article about this. And they were, like, hey, this is really interesting because, as you're probably aware, the NTSB had pushed the message out that they really wanted the FAA to mandate carbon monoxide detectors in aircraft. And the FAA was kind of pushing back on it because, and I understand, because now it adds a whole level of certification for new aircraft and how are you going to retrofit and which systems and et cetera. So the FAA has been a little bit reluctant to do that. With all the discussion about it, though, it's just been, this can happen. But I've seen it in more than one corner that pusher aircraft were assumed to be immune. And so that was a unique approach with me wanting to write this article was that, look, guys, no, frankly, you're crazy if you don't fly the carbon monoxide detector in any airplane, reciprocating engine. So EAA said, yeah, you have something unique to add here. So today, actually, EAA published the article that I put together on this. And so it's got some additional information and pictures. You're welcome as you put this program together for publishing or viewing on YouTube. You can, if it fits, to put those pictures in, in the video here as we talk, and that way they can see the exhaust broken pipe and how these things actually alert and can get your attention. And also, there's a chart in there that shows the effects of carbon monoxide over time. And 800 parts per million, twice what I had. It's you're 45 minutes until you're incapacitated. 1,600 parts per million. And I really think it was going to go much higher than 400 parts per million.
Likely.
Just based on, there was no reason for it to be that. So, at least limited to that. I mean,
I just bought I think I mentioned it last podcast, a CO detector from Aretha. and it uses a solid state detector that is good for 10 plus years, and it detects down to 1 part in a million. And so it's actually diagnostic. It's got different lights that will flash at different levels, all the way to the emergency level. But I learned a really important thing, I think, because all the detectors I've been looking at over the years, that we got to have it recalibrated every year or 2 years or something like that. And it turns out what's happening is the sensor actually uses a liquid, and that liquid starts to evaporate.
Okay.
That's what they mean by
The
recalibrating.
limiting factor.
Yeah, that's the limiting factor. So this solid state detector is really interesting to me. So
what's also interesting, Johnny, there is until I started flying with the Century and this other one, I was literally, as an instructor, flying around in Piper Arrows and Warriors. I was flying around with a Home Depot, rectangular one that had a digital readout, and that's how I found another carbon monoxide problem we had with an airplane. Different story. I won't even go into that right now. But after landing, it went off, and I'm like, "What's this?" I thought, because one of the problems was if you lay something on it, the test button would get pushed and it would go off. So I got back in the airplane and made sure nothing was on it, and then it still kept going off, and I'm like, "What in the world?" And sure enough, it was a carbon monoxide problem in the aircraft, and it's a whole different story. But the point being, I use that, and it actually works well. But if you get into some forums and people are discussing it, they kind of don't particularly embrace those and like them very much for the following reasons. Home carbon monoxide detectors are inherently designed so they don't get the fire department coming out to your house, every other day when you're cooking on your stove. So they've got, first of all, they don't even start registering digitally until 35 parts per million. And then it can even go on up to 50 parts per million, 100 parts per million, and it still won't alert, because what it's looking for is a level in time, and then at that point, once it hits a certain threshold, it will go off. But I would say, though, it still served me very well, because what I would see is, like, if you do slow flight in a Warrior, Archer, or whatever, and you get the nose up just a little bit, then it starts coming in, and you'll get about 80 parts per million, and it will alert even with the Home Depot, carbon monoxide detector. So I would encourage you, if you can't fly with anything else, then take that thing along with you. And it served me well in pointing out a problem and giving me confidence that it works. But again, it won't register until 35 parts per million. This forensics that I showed you, it'll start registering at 9 parts per million. It'll start beeping at you at 25 parts per million. Notably, though, and this is in the article I wrote for EAA, and with some research I did after all this, new aircraft can, and this is there's a FAR reference for it, but they can be certified up to 50 parts per million. It's once you get over 50 parts per million that it's not okay, and then but up to that, it's really not considered an issue. But and then the chart in my article it goes into that. So
that doesn't give me a warm fuzzy.
No.
Yeah, it's gonna be stinky with planes. Wow. Get your CO2 detectors.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check my Sentry. I don't think I've got one on mine. I've got the little one. The little
the
little dongle. I don't think
so. What I've done is, right now I've committed to myself, I will never fly another airplane again without a carbon monoxide detector in it, winter, summer, whenever. And so with this forensics, what I've done is I've put a little piece of Velcro in the back of it. And so I can inconspicuously put that Velcro, mating Velcro in the cockpit in a prominent location so I can see it, not so I can hear it. As I said earlier, you can't hear this thing. And so I gave a review on the device on Sporties, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. And the manufacturer was a little bit displeased that I gave him a 4 out of 5 when I credit was saving my life. And I said, the reason I give it a 4 out of 5 is because I can't hear it. And he's like, well, you can't make it audible with a device that small. And I'm like, I got it, but I want people to recognize what this limitation is and incentivize them to put it in a prominent location. I fly the glider club here, and we tow with Polynese. And I talked to our our board about it. There's a safety officer for the board, and I convinced them that we need these in our tow planes. And sure enough, they bought them $100 each, and we bought them. And so So I love the device, love the company, but again, I'm not promoting their product for any kind of profit or whatever. There are a lot of different types out there that offer various levels of advantages and perhaps disadvantages. But I have anecdotal evidence that both of these serve me extremely well, and here I am to talk about it.
And if you think you can smell it, you're thinking wrong, I suppose.
Yeah, but
Well,
carbon
maybe,
monoxide is
maybe.
not, you can't smell it. You're going to smell
You,
maybe the other exhaust byproducts, but you
that's
won't
it.
smell carbon monoxide.
So you can smell exhaust,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't smell carbon monoxide. And Gunny, we talked. I shared a story or email the other day about that story with the Dan Bass up in Minnesota. My God, what a story! He took off. He flew a couple hour and a half. He loaded up on carbon monoxide. Again, it's got a 4-hour half-life, so he didn't get rid of all of it before he took off again at night, 5 degrees in February. And within, I think it was 5 minutes after takeoff, he was out. And but he was on autopilot. He used all the gas in one of the tanks. It landed in the only field around. It was 800 feet long, and he survived. So yeah,
He survived. It was
it's a fascinating story.
What airplane type was that? Mooney?
Mooney, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. Well, thanks, Kevin, for sharing that CEO story. It's a really important story, and I'm glad you're here to share it with us.
Yeah, sorry I talk so much, but you get me going. I'm gonna talk, spread the word here.
Wind you up.
Big takeaway: get a carbon monoxide detector, fly with it. I'll be happy. So.
Good.
All right. So I want you to give us an update on that Gcast save you told me about that just happened.
Yeah, it's just I'll just talk in broad terms here. It was
first off, Gcast again for non-fighter type folks stands for.
Okay. Yeah. So Gunny and I did an interview. What was a year and a half or so ago. It was in my AFRL role. They authorized me to do a public release, and so I'm just going to kind of extend that here because we're talking about the same thing. Basically, this is all historical and public information. The next few things I'm going to say here. If you go back and look at an F-16 over its lifetime worldwide, there's been about 170 of them that have been lost through preventable accidents. There were CFITs, controlled flight into terrain. And of those, 150 of them were assessed to be, auto Gcast would have prevented it. And what auto Gcast is, automatic ground collision avoidance system, it's aware of where the ground is, and at the last possible instant, it will take the aircraft and it will, with 5G, it will pull 5Gs in the recovery. It doesn't matter the attitude. It can be upside down. It can be supersonic, straight down. It doesn't matter. It will, when it's at the last possible instant, it takes it from the pilot, rolls wings level, pulls 5Gs, and basically pulls the aircraft away from the ground.
Wow. That's 5 positive Gs. It always set for 5 positive Gs, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, exactly. We're not Patty Wagstaff. We're not doing -8. We're not going to be doing that kind of stuff. So, so it'll unload, to like a half a G, because you'll get an increased roll rate, as you know, right. Especially in fighter type aircraft. If you unload, so it'll unload to like a half a G. It'll roll upright. It's several hundred degrees a second, like 300 or 400 degrees a second. It'll roll the aircraft, back upright, and then 5Gs. And then it's smart because if the pilot, for example, is spatially disoriented, it will lock him out or her in roll and in the reduction of G. So if you think you know what you're doing and you don't, it knows better. Yeah. So it will allow you to add Gs. And what we've seen with G-locks, G-induced loss of consciousness to date, the pilots have, with one exception, have always added Gs to it. And the system's pulling 5Gs. You'll see it go up to 9, as they're doing the recovery. From 2000 to 2013, there were 15 pilots that died from preventable accidents in the U.S. Air Force. From 2014 until today, 9 years later, 0.
Wow.
So, and
because it's implemented throughout the F-16 fleet.
In the U.S. Air Force, you have the Block 4050 F-16s, the newer models. All of them have it. That's some 600 F-16s. And then the older ones, the Block 30s, which is what I flew mostly. In fact, that is what I flew, or earlier ones. And they are going to start getting the system, I think, next year. So they're still going to keep flying with the Guard and Reserve and a little bit of active duty. And the Navy flies them as well. So there's about 300 and some of those that are out there. So around 1,000 aircraft. And so,
is this standard equipment in newer fighters?
yeah, we, when I say we, I mean an army of people won the Collier Trophy in 2018.
Oh, wow.
And when I say we, I mean AFRL, Lockheed, NASA, the 416th test unit out at Edwards, and other very critical key players. We won the Collier Trophy in 2018 for expedited fielding of auto Gcast on the F-35. So it originally was not slated till mid-20s, and once it became evident that this was saving lives left and right on the F-16, it became politically expedient, let's put it that way, to get it on the F-35. And so basically, it was a study AFRL did. We showed that it would work with the existing aircraft architecture. Previously, it was thought that it wouldn't work until they got an upgrade to central computers and flight control computers. And we established that it would work. And the lab where I work paid for that study, and it established that it would work. And rapidly, it was developed. And after that, and it fielded roughly a year later. And when the F-16, though, it literally started in the late 80s, early 90s, and it took 25 years almost to get it on the F-16. But once it got on the F-16, it set the stage for how you could do it on other platforms. And so it fielded rapidly on the F-35. So it's in the F-35 now. And we've also, it also has application to heavy aircraft as well. You're not going to pull 5Gs in the C-130, but you can do turning avoidance maneuvers, potentially, maybe climb, maybe not. Fighter for us, it's always 5Gs and climb, and we can overclimb if necessary Mount Everest at that point in a fighter, right? So it knows it's looking 3 miles out in front, and it decides when does it need to do its thing. With a heavy aircraft, you're not going to have the same option, So there are other maneuvers that can be done and make it applicable for that as well. So.
What are some of the situations that gets the the F-16 into the lawn dart position other than spatial disorientation? Does this target fixation? Is that a classic case where this system can save the guy?
Yeah. So what you have is if you pie chart, right? And if you look, half of the losses of F-16 since it fielded, and this is worldwide, were broadly controlled flight into terrain. And then we have subcategories within that: spatial disorientation, G-induced loss of consciousness, and other. So you get task saturated, target fixation, or whatever. So that's where half of our losses have been. Excuse me. And again, this is all public record. If you go to the National Aeronautics Association website and look at the 2018, you look at the list of Collier Award winners, you'll see us in 2018, and it will link you to a video on YouTube that gives you all the statistics behind what I'm telling you right here. So it's all public knowledge. For whatever reason, it's not searchable on YouTube, but if you have a link, you can get to it. And Gunny, I can send you the link if you want to provide that in the comments.
That'd be good to put it in this video.
Yeah.
But at that time in 2018, we had 8 attributed saves, and now we've got 12. And so we're averaging about 1 or so a year, where it's unquestionably the pilot came home when they wouldn't have otherwise. So.
Wow. So if half of it's a CFIT, what's the other half?
About 25% of it's dogs and cats, like crazy stuff. Like, no joke, way back when in the 90s, a guy was taking off at Homestead and hit a pig on takeoff, and that was a Class A. So, running out of gas, shutting the engine down inadvertently because the throttle lock doesn't work or something like that. It's just dogs and cats stuff.
So these are other accidents that are not that your Gcast system's not even gonna get involved with. It's
correct.
So you're saying out of all of the accidents, fully half of them you can prevent with Gcast.
Yes. So 25%, sorry, pi, half of it is CFIT. Again, we've had no losses in the F-16 since 2014 for where auto Gcast was installed on the aircraft and it was operating within its design parameters. So, if you follow the news, very unfortunately, there was a Thunderbird lost a few years ago but the Thunderbirds don't fly with auto Gcast because it
would screw up the whole show.
Yeah, you can't. So, but there was so the pie chart. So half of it's CFIT gone, and 25% is hitting pigs and running out of gas and stuff like that. The other 25% is mid-airs. And so we are hard at work. We demonstrated back in 2016, 2017 that what we call it's ACAS, air collision avoidance system.
Automatic.
But what you have to, yes. But what you have to do is if you're going to have an air collision avoidance system, you've got to, especially in fighter aircraft, you've got to blend in a ground collision avoidance system, because what you can't have happen is you're doing an intercept down low, and then you're going to have a midair, and the aircraft then flies you into the ground while it's trying to avoid a midair. So it's got to be an integrated system, ground aware.
Yeah.
And so we developed that and flew it back.
That's got to be some tight tolerances, because you're doing really close formation work.
Oh yeah.
Rejoins and that sort of thing. How does the system know that? Boy, it's got to be accurate, because you're just going to miss them by inches or feet.
Yeah. So, let me preface my response to that with this. When I first heard about auto Gcast, I said, "No way, this can't work."
Yeah.
There's no way.
Said the same thing about electricity in the wheel.
Yeah, it's just like, look, we fly low, we fly fast, we're diving the ground intentionally and close, and shooting a gun and dropping bombs, and it's like this cannot work. Well, I'm telling you,
Wow.
23 years later, I'm a total convert, and I have data to show otherwise. So likewise, when I heard about air collision avoidance system, I said, no way, this can't work. And this is even after Gcast would work. I went, no, this can't work, because with BFM, you're in close, you're 500 feet away from another aircraft, you're rolling, barrel rolls and aircraft and three-dimensionally. And there's, so my assumption was this cannot work. The reason it works is because, when you're a fighter pilot fighting another aircraft, you are assessing what you think the other guy's going to do. You're assessing his energy state, what his aircraft is capable of, but you don't know it perfectly. You can guess it pretty good at the range, at the closure, all of that. But what computers do is they can know this stuff exactly. So it can know range, it can know closure, it can know aspect, and further, it knows intent. The system the aircraft talk to each other, and basically says, Joe, you go high, I'm going to go low, and it does it at the last possible instant because of a high-speed data link that's conveying this information. So yes, it will work during full up, basic fighter maneuvers, dogfighting. It will work during rejoins. And what happens during rejoins? Clearly, you're going to sometimes want to do a battle damage check or a rejoin to just go through the weather, formation landing, etc. The system is smart, and so what it does, it switches off. Once you have your range and closure under control, it goes, okay, I'm switching off now, and you have to know what you're doing if you're 10 feet off of another aircraft's wing, and it just switches off. And there's a relationship between range and closure where this thing, makes that decision. So yes,
so it's not going to prevent the fingertip formation foul up.
Nope.
But
no, you can still do that.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. So tell us about this save that just happened. Over water? Was it over water?
Yeah. So it was just in broad terms. It was spatial disorientation, night over the water, and it worked. And that's about all I can tell you. But there is zero question that the pilot would not have come home without auto Gcast. We got the video yesterday. It was already a conclusion, but got to see the video yesterday, and there's no question to be had.
After it goes through its evolution, where does it spit you out?
So what it does is it activates, and then it assures terrain clearance. And as soon as terrain clearance is assured, it disconnects. And if the pilot's ready to fly, then it'll fly. And the pilot will go back to flying again. If he's not, worst case. So here you go. You're going to ground at Mach 1.2, and it activates and it flies. At that point, it'll probably get your nose up probably 20 or 30 degrees nose high. If you're an afterburner, you'll just stay there until you go up to 30, 40,000 feet again, and the thing will roll off. If the pilot is really incapacitated from heart attack or whatever. At that point, it'd go back. It'd be like heading to the ground again. It would activate again until it assured ground clearance, and then it would go until it ran out of energy, and then it would head back to the ground again. So it's not going to take you home. It's going to assure terrain clearance, and then it's going to very promptly give it back to you.
Do you have to manually disconnect it, or
no?
Yeah, just
no. So what's important though to understand is that if the system, you have to allow for the fact it could do something it shouldn't do, and so there's a real quick way on the stick. There's a paddle switch. So if it does something you don't like, you can immediately, very quickly kick it off. And so I don't know if we've had that. I can't recall, but it's not expected. A tremendous amount of work went into making the system. We have basically 3 of the 10 commandments. We got 3 10 commandments here, and it's basically do no harm. So as we're trying to keep aircraft from crashing, we can't make the flight controls do something that hurts somebody, unmerited, just kicks in and activates. Secondly, we have to not be nuisancy, because if it was nuisancy, guess what? Fighter pilots will turn it off. They won't use it. And then thirdly, you got to do what you say you're going to do, and you got to prevent accidents. So the real challenge with this system was getting pilots to not be unaccepting of it, because they, like me, thought it would be nuisancy. So a lot of work had to go into making it non-nuisance. And it's essentially considered non-nuisance at this point. Every now and then something will happen, but you'll understand what it did, and there really are no complaints about it. It's fully embraced by the pilot community without exception. I've never heard anybody, and I'm still quite connected to the pilot community through my work at AFRL. I know what the sentiment is out there, and it's very strong and embracing of the technology.
We went through a similar kind of human factors evolution in the air tanker industry years ago with the implementation of traffic collision avoidance systems into air tankers, the fire bombers, and they just thought it'd be no, it's going to be another distraction in the cockpit. But nowadays, everybody wants one. Everybody needs one. Everybody has one, and they love it.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, I have a question for you. You're saying you're going to go talk about Gcast in some fashion with a civilian autopilot manufacturer. Can you speak more about that right now?
Yeah. During the Oshkosh, I've been up there the last several years, and I will go around and talk to various vendors, about, the application of our technology to general aviation and commercial aviation. And I think there's a place for that. And so we've had conversations with some vendors out there about the potential application of this technology to general aviation aircraft. If you take a look at the statistics, I just did my CFI renewal back in January, and like everything else, I forget it after about a week. But what I seem to recall is that the leading killer in general aviation remains loss of control of the aircraft. And in some cases, it's base to final, but it's more typically associated with inadvertent flight into IMC, and that's a huge factor there. And so flying into the mountains at night or whatever. So auto Gcast could indeed work. Now, you have some challenges though, because the way auto Gcast works, for us, we have to have in the F-16, you have to have very accurate model of where you are. It does not actively sense the ground. It uses a digital terrain elevation database. Every latitude longitude on the planet has a elevation associated with it. And there was a shuttle mission back in the early 2000s, and it mapped the whole world from 61 north to 61 south, highly accurately, unprecedented level of digital terrain elevation data. So you have to have that. But guess what? Our general aviation aircraft do. When I fly my airplane and I start getting close to the ground, for whatever reason, it starts squawking at me, and it'll start saying terrain. So it's already there, even in like in a Garmin system.
It doesn't need a radar altimeter sort of system.
No, because you can know, again, based on a lat long, the virtual world around you, so you don't have to be actively sensing it to make it work. So then you have to deal with the nuisance, right? So the system isn't just going off just because, you're flying close to the ground, so if you want to go skipping across the cornfields at 100 feet, is it going to know to not activate? Not advocating that, but just people do that kind of stuff. They go out and fly low in places where it's safe and still be compliant with the FARs, right? And then you got to have an aircraft model as well. What does it take? But the thing of it is, with F-16, we had to really factor in a model because the aircraft can be 250 knots, and 10 degrees nose low, or it can be 800 knots and going straight down. So you've got to model in the supersonic, and you got to model the performance characteristics of the aircraft and how much altitude it takes to recover with a tremendous turn radius that you can have at those higher speeds, And so general aviation aircraft generally are not going to have that. There's going to be a little bit of a difference in their turn radius as they're heading towards the ground. So basically, and also you don't have the G available that you have in a fighter aircraft. So you really want to focus probably around 2 Gs for the recovery. And one of the real challenges with it, none of the other things I've mentioned thus far are particularly challenging.
Yeah.
They're not. But what is challenging, and this is where the focus needs to come in our discussions with industry, is, when I say I'm saying even to you, to gunny, to anybody that cares about this, and not AFRLs. It's not our job to go, get this installed on general aviation aircraft. We can talk about the lessons learned. Potentially, we can collaborate to some degree with it. But the message to the vendors, and in particular the Autopilot vendor, is the Autopilot has to have sufficient authority to roll the aircraft upright. So I watched your video the other day about where you went up and was a GFC 500, I think it was, or HC, whichever it is, and you were showing when it did the ESP mode, I guess it was, electronic stabilization, whatever that stands for,
Protection.
and then also when you hit the blue button, which is a wings leveler. But if you are, if you're in 80 degrees of bank, or you're inverted, or you're 50 degrees nose low, those aren't going to work for you.
No.
And it's because they're just not, they don't have the authority, and there are software limitations that keep them from being engaged.
Also, it doesn't know, its system basically can say it doesn't really have the gyros or the piezoelectric gyros to give it all attitude. So it just can operate under a very narrow window. That is a limitation factor for applying it to general aviation.
Yeah.
Basically, you need piezoelectric gyros to tell for all attitude.
Envelope.
Yes.
And then how do you keep it from sending you up and then stalling the guy out right away?
Yeah. There are challenges there, certainly. It's just that it troubles me, just from a general aviation perspective, to think that somebody could be, in a 50-degree bank and 20 degrees nose low, and there's nothing they can turn to help them out, out of that, and I just would like to think we could, work or influence the manufacturers of autopilots, both in the servo authority, its ability to work, no prohibitions or inhibitions from it working from regardless of the attitude inherent to the servo itself, but also any software limitations that might be there. They may say, okay, we don't work beyond 60 degrees. That's it. But that's probably when you most need it.
That is when you need it. As a matter of fact, just to foot stomp it, is when I teach UPRT, upset prevention recovery training, my target G that I'm trying to get people to learn muscle memory is 3. I think to be able to really successfully recover from low altitude, you need at least 3 Gs. And virtually all the airplanes can do that. A standard category airplane is 3.8 G. A transport category airplane is 2.8. And as far as I can see that if you do 3, that's a mild over G, and it's better to have a mild over G than have hit the terrain. So.
Yeah, and you see it in the model airplane industry, the little foamies you get. Of course, they're all radio controlled anyways, and they've got all the gyros, but they can recover from extremely unusual attitudes automatically with the push of a button.
Well, if you go watch that video I referred you to on the National Aeronautics Association's website, at the end, as it's kind of wrapping up the end and summarizing, what the work that's been done in this area for ground collision avoidance, it does talk about some standards that have been I guess, authored for application to general aviation aircraft, and it actually shows a cozy or a velocity. I think it's a cozy flying, and where they've actually gone out and done some basic testing of this with both unmanned aircraft, little drones, but also in a cozy as well. So thought process is started on that. And I do think we would see lives saved if we could get this technology out there. It doesn't have to be as sophisticated and capable as what it is in the F-16, because very few general aviation aircraft are going to go out on a 10, low angle high drag pass gun, if you remember those, and dive at the ground and or do a strafe pass and recover 75 feet above the ground. That we're not going to design a system like that for general aviation. One of the challenges, of course, though, is let's say, especially general aviation aircraft, if you lose your engine, now you need to land in a field. Well, it needs to know that you're really wanting to land in that field and not try to recover you from it. Or you've got, like in my case with the carbon monoxide, if I said, I don't know what's going on here, but I got to put this thing down somewhere. I don't want the system going, well, you got a running engine, and why are you diving at the ground and keeping me from doing that? So you build it smartly, though. There are ways to do it, and we clearly, the gist of what's needed to make this happen is well established. GPS, terrain database, 2Gs, at least 2Gs in the recovery. We already have autopilots. It's just modifying them in a way that's smart and well thought out. And this can be done.
You get good enough with this technology, you'll be working yourselves right out of a job. We won't even need pilots anymore. This is
I know they talk about
this
that.
is the way autonomous flight is gonna learn. Is through this sort of technology.
Yep, indeed.
Brilliant.
Well, this is it's been fascinating.
Yeah.
Two really interesting topics. Glad you survived the CO incident and can share that with us.
Me too.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think my wife's happy too about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think hopefully we'll spread some word about that and people start thinking about it. And the Gcast is really interesting. If you watch that video, not necessarily you, Kevin, but if people have watched that video I did, you can see then in some of the floor protection that the airplane will do just this.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's trying to do the floor protection, but it pitches you up into a stall and then it pitches down again. So it's just bouncing between two floors. So what we are is, it's a great thing, the blue button and the enhanced, the ESP floors, but it's just the first generation.
Yeah. So for both of you, it would be easier probably if you do get up right Patterson way. I can get you into our simulator where you can fly the ground collision avoidance capability as well as the air. We can demonstrate both of those, and it's an extremely accurate model for what's going on in the airplane. So
that'd be very cool.
It would be quite enlightening to you. We also have related to the blue button. The F-16 and the F-35 as well have what we call a PARS button, a pilot activated recovery system. And so basically you hit that and it brings you to wings level. So ideally you want to, if you got a problem, you're far better off to head it off at the pass. And we have had activations of PARS. And we've had some situations where the pilot should have used PARS. So he didn't get into, because what you don't want to do is rely on auto Gcast, because it's going to be a pretty violent maneuver, and it's going to be last instant. And, it's pretty humbling, and you really don't want to do that, and you hope it works, and it should work. We've had no failures of it to date when it was needed, but I wouldn't just point at the top of a mountain and just count on it working. I wouldn't use it for a poor man's TFR system.
You're seconds from impact.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Good stuff.
Yeah, mostly again, mostly the reason I contacted Gunny was over this carbon monoxide thing. I really wanted to get the message out there. Again, just a foot stomp here. This has nothing to do with the velocity aircraft, but it is a comment though on pusher aircraft in general. They are not, in spite of what anybody wants to tell you, they are not immune to carbon monoxide. And please get a carbon monoxide detector. All pilots go get one, fly with it. It's basically, there's no reason to not do it these days. So
Important safety
Nice.
tip.
Good.
All right.
Good. Well, I learned a lot here tonight. These things
Yeah,
are
well,
always
good.
so fascinating.
It is. Good stuff.
Educational.
You know, I
Well,
might be speaking up at Oshkosh this year. I asked.
Good.
We're going to have a booth up there in the Federal Pavilion. If you want to stop by, we're going to be sitting there with a museum, the Air Force Museum. We'll be sharing a booth with them. You'll see us there. And I've asked to be able to speak at a forum up there about our technology. I won't be talking about carbon monoxide there because I'll be there in an AFRL role. But you know, that will not be my presentation. I will talk about auto Gcast in our forum discussion if I'm approved for that.
Very good. Look
Very
forward
good.
to it.
all right. Well, thanks for joining us on BSWorks.
Yeah, there we go. So
Good job,
Juan,
guys.
Yeah, I'll see you on this summer and shake your hand up there, Oshkosh. So
Yeah.
and Danny, I see you as well. I'll let you buy my lunch this time. So
That's right.
all right,
All right.
okay,
All right.
Take
Well,
care.
thanks a lot, and we'll see you
All
next
right.
time.
yeah,
See you
bye-bye.
here.